So the snatch is the first movement that you perform during an Olympic weightlifting competition. It revolves around moving the bar from the floor to overhead in one sweep motion. It is definitely the most complex movement in all of barbell sports, and I think it could be argued to be one of the most complex movements in sports in general, simply because of the demands in technique and raw power that it has. But it's hard to tell. Once you get into throws and other specific skills, you can find things that are maybe equally as complex. I'm not trying to claim that the snatch is the holy grail of all movements. I'm just saying that it's a pretty hard movement to learn and master. Regardless, the snatch is the perfect balance between strength, power, flexibility, mobility, motor control, and mental fortitude. This also means that it might not be the best choice for athletes in general, because the same things that make it a unique and challenging lift are the same ones that are going to limit the amount of carryover that it can have into other areas of fitness. Now, maximizing the amount of carryover into other areas of fitness is not something that should dictate everything that you do in your training, but it should be considered. And the truth is that even if you were to master the snatch, you probably will never be able to lift more than 50, maybe 60% of your best deadlift. So it's not great for strength development, and if you're trying to develop power, you're more than likely are often going to be guided towards a power clean or other easier movements. Plus, spending a great deal of time in overhead mobility, hip mobility, can be overkill for most sports, not to mention the painstaking process of having to snatch over and over and over and over again to work in every single little intricacy of the movement. But if you're an Olympic weightlifter or you're genuinely interested in learning Olympic weightlifting, I hope I can provide you with some useful information in this video. So let's get into it. Just like in the power clean video, let's get some specifics out of the way. When we are talking about the snatch, we are talking about the full movement. If I say snatch, I mean a full snatch, taking it through the whole range of motion into a full squat. Saying squat snatch is redundant, okay? A snatch will be taken to a full squat regardless of the loading. I have to specify that it's a power snatch for you to not have to take it into a full squat, okay? And you can have variations to these names. You can have a hang snatch, which means that you still have to catch it in a full squat, or you can have a hang power snatch, which means that you will catch it in a power position. And a power position is dictated by the angle of the upper thigh as it refers to the floor. So anything over parallel will be considered a power, and maybe up to parallel, it will be considered a power. Anything below that, we'll consider a squat. Now the video is going to be divided into 3 parts: the first pull, the second pull, and the third pull. And we're going to touch a little bit on the bottom position and how to train it at the end. So let's get into it. So for starters, the grip is going to be fairly wide. There are a ton of videos out there with techniques and measurements of all sorts, but in my experience, they always require some tweaking. So in order to save yourself some time, just grab the bar, set your shoulders back, but don't shrug or forcefully contract anything. Now, move your grip out wide, keeping your arms straight. Oftentimes, the grip will be somewhere along the neural markings in the bar. A helpful trick that I got from Catalyst Athletics is to make sure you have enough clearance to lift your leg. The bar should make contact on the meaty section above your pubic bone, and this should not hurt. Commit to memory the place your hands are on, as compared to the neural markings, and this will be your starting point. It is not crazy for your grip to change slightly over time as you get better at the lifts. And if you happen to have extremely long arms, you may never actually find the perfect spot, and you'll be forced to have a slight degree of elbow bend, which is not ideal, but it is not the end of the world either. Foot positioning is also a big talking point. Once again, I cannot give you a perfect method to find your stance that will work for absolutely everyone. What I can give you, however, is a set of guidelines. Due to the wider grip on the bar, you're going to be forced to have your upper body closer to the ground. So you need to make sure you have adequate room to sit into the position and exert force with your legs. For this, a slight opening of the feet and a wider stand will oftentimes be better. But once again, this will take some experimentation before you can settle on a definite stance. A wide stance tends to be better for longer leg lifters and lifters who are weak off the floor. It is true that the wider your stance is, the more force can be lost, simply due to the force lines splitting into 2 planes. However, these losses will not be catastrophic, and if having a narrower stance messes up your positioning and the next 2 pulls, whatever extra newtons of force you're able to generate won't matter. The whole point of your stance is to get into position with a straight back and upright posture, with the eyes forward, and in good balance. This doesn't mean comfortable, and don't be discouraged if even holding the proper position is incredibly hard and awkward at first. When viewed from the side, the shoulders should be slightly over the wrist, and the knees will also be over the bar in most cases. The elbows should be pointing slightly out and the shoulders should be slightly internally rotated. The shoulder blade should be in a neutral position. This means engaged and slightly depressed in order to allow for adequate lat activation. The hips should be on the lower end, but this will vary as well, depending on the lifter's proportions. Keep in mind that your torso will already be lowered to the ground because of the wider grip on the bar, so you have to work to get those hips down. This is important to note because mechanically speaking, it will be easier to lift the weight by hinging at the hip, and this makes keeping the hips high a natural tendency. For general rules of thumb, you normally want the hips just slightly over the knees, or level with the knees. Shorter limb athletes will have an easier time with this, and they may even be able to drop the hips below the knees, just because they just have better leverages and mechanics. Remember to always use a hook grip. This is a non-negotiable if you actually want to learn the lifts. It doesn't matter how good or strong your grip is. The tension that you carry in your arms when gripping something will be counterproductive while you move through the lifts. It oftentimes leads to trying to curl the bar up. Now, we want to brace hard, as I've explained before. Take a big breath and engage your core hard. This should provide a 360-degree feeling of pressure around your core. Beginners should try to start from a static stance, and as you improve, you can move into more of a dynamic start. But keep in mind that world-class lifters still use both of these methods, so don't feel obligated to use one or the other. Most lifts are missed in the first pull, but this doesn't mean that it's a complicated thing. It really boils down to being able to stay in position. As you initiate the lift, focus on pushing hard against the ground through the whole foot. Keep your back angle the same and stay in position. You should actively be trying to stay over the bar and make sure that your back remains at the same angle. While the first pull is about forcefully staying in position, the second pull is more about flow. The main thing to remember here is that the lifts are about moving the bar up. They're all about moving upwards, with the exception of the turnover, but we'll get to that in a second. If we focus on moving up and staying vertical, rather than trying to arch and bump this bar up, most of the important factors in the lifts will fall into place. As we pass the knee, we have to work to keep our back engaged and pull this bar in. We do this by working to keep the bar as close to us as possible. And if we focus on moving upwards, you will naturally go through what is described as a double knee bend or knee scoop. And just to be clear here, you do not do this intentionally, but it should happen. There's a video by Catalyst Athletics explaining this that I'll link below. But in summary, think about jumping from the power position. And as you can see here, your knees will just naturally travel forward. It's the same concept. Athletes who are more hip dominant will have a greater degree of knee flexion. Meanwhile, athletes who are more leg dominant will tend to stay more upright. Now let's talk about contact. This is one of those non-negotiables. The reason is this: if you were to stand with the bar in your hands, you would notice that it will naturally make contact with your hip. This is because of the pendulum created by your shoulder joint and your arm. Now contrast this with the fact that in all of the lifts, you will be leaning slightly back. When you look at it from this angle, the only reason why the bar would not touch you is because you're actively avoiding it somehow. So finally, moving into the third pull. Remember what I said earlier, the lifts are about moving the weight upwards. And in the beginning, we do this by pushing upwards with our legs. But after you finish the full extension and you have completed the second pull, you still need to catch this weight overhead. So the next step is to get yourself into that position. In this, your legs cannot help you since they're not strapped to the ground. So the only thing we have is our arms. During the final pull, you need to aggressively activate your upper body and pull yourself under this bar. This is where the speed comes from. It comes from our upper bodies. A helpful cue for this is elbows up and out. We do not want to create an arch with our arms. We want to pull this bar up and let our arms bend and act as a whip as we position ourselves under the weight. So do your best to keep those elbows up and out and put those knuckles down. During this third pull, we want to work on staying vertical. A slight degree of lean is normal, but it should come from the hip while keeping the torso straight. We do not want a noticeable back arch during this. Finally, as we pull ourselves under, we need to finish every lift with a strong lockout. So once again, you are changing the way in which you apply force. During the first and second pulls, you are focused on driving the bar up with your legs. After contact, you keep working to move this bar up, but now you're using your arms to pull yourself under. And finally, in order to catch and hold this weight, you need to be aggressively punching up and actively pushing against this falling weight. This is the key to catching the weight. It is not about throwing it around and over you. It is about pulling yourself under it and pushing up against it. Pointers in the receiving position. You want your shoulder blades engaged but not completely retracted. There's a great video, once again, by Catalyst Athletics that I'll link below. But in summary, in order to find the perfect stance, you should place the bar on your traps, pinch the upper portion of your shoulder blades together and lift up. The head should always be past the bar to help maintain these positions. This should give, if you can reach these positions without feeling compelled to shrug, there might be some mobility restrictions and imbalances that you need to address. Catching the snatch will always be the most challenging part of the lift, unlike in a clean. And for this, a solid bottom position and a solid overhead position are paramount. So as you learn the lifts, make sure you're completely stabilized at the bottom after every single snatch. The more you struggle with this part, the longer you should hold it, anywhere from 2 to 5 seconds. Stay there, stay engaged, stay braced, stay hard, and only then start moving up. The weights are never gonna be that high compared to your squat, so you shouldn't really be concerned about like fatigue, and it'll be good training for your legs anyways. So stay in the bottom, stabilize, and then get up. Be patient. And that's the video. I'm gonna start a series with like all the Olympic lifts and most of their variations. So hopefully you enjoy this type of content. I enjoy making these videos. I like the Olympic lifts. I think they're great movements that every athlete should learn at one point or another, especially when you retire and you're looking for something fun to do. They're hard movements to learn, but I think they're worth it. And the sport of Olympic weightlifting as a whole deserves more attention. I'm happy with the growth it's been experiencing over the past few years, so let's keep it up. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video and got something useful out of it. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. And yeah, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. And thank you for watching.
It is important to draw wisdom from many different places. If we take it from only one place, it becomes rigid and stale. Understanding others, the other elements, and the other nations will help you become whole.